In the link in the description below, I've put some resources to help you. And in this video, I'm going to go into a bit more detail and give you some context as to why I put them there. So I guess the first thing to think about is like Warren Buffett. Now, Warren Buffett's overall investment strategy has always been like an overwhelming bet on the US. You know, all of the companies that he's invested in, apart from BYD, Nubank, Mitsubishi, and a handful of other Japanese companies, you know, the rest of the remaining companies are predominantly based in the US. And with that, he's basically placed a bet on the fact that the US will remain a dominant economic superpower in the future. But the dollar and the pound sterling are actually losing their value in real time, and you know, I'm sure we've all experienced the increase in the cost of living. Rumours circulate that the BRICS countries are coming together to announce a new currency which is actually going to be backed by gold, whereas our current currencies are fiat currencies. Now, the reason the dollar is so powerful is because it's the global currency. It's used for trade. It's used for the trade of oil, for example. And now that countries are starting to ditch the dollar is gradually going to lose its status, if you like, as the go-to currency for international trade. And on top of that, Naledi Pandor, who is the Minister of International Relations, has recently announced that 34 countries have applied to join the BRICS. Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, the United Arab Emirates are now all full members of the BRICS, having recently just joined Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Egypt has just ditched the dollar for trade, and countries like India, China, Brazil, Malaysia, and Bolivia, amongst others, are seeking to set up trade channels using currencies other than the dollar. And with this shift away from using the dollar, it's no longer going to be in demand by these countries, which in turn will lead to a depreciation of the value of the dollar as well. You can already see the gradual decline of power of the G7 versus the BRICS by this visual I found on Statista. And if you don't know what GDP is, in simple terms, it basically just evaluates the health of a country's economy. But looking at this over 1995 to 2010 to 2003, combined with the fact that the BRICS are expanding even more, you can kind of see a pattern emerging. And, you know, if we're to project over the next 5 to 10 years what will happen, is kind of obvious to me, or it looks like the BRICS are going to overtake the G7. And so as the US loses its grip on the world's economic superpower, it's likely there'll be a power struggle between countries as the US comes to terms with what's happening. You know, we're already in a period where we're experiencing tensions and conflict between nations, and with an economic power struggle, this could just add more gas to the fire as well. The consequence of a depreciating dollar will make everyday life a lot more expensive for the middle class. You know, imported goods are going to be a lot more expensive. I'm talking about things like electronics, like iPhones, to automobiles, to clothing. You know, a lot of these things are manufactured abroad and brought into our respective countries. And with high prices, high inflation, you know, if wages don't keep up with inflation, this is going to just cause even more problems for the middle class. And so with all of the information in mind with the BRICS, the increase in GDP of certain countries and the decrease of the G7, for example, you know, I thought it'd be really helpful to put together some potential opportunities, or starting to look at some opportunities that you can look at to help you protect your wealth as we see this global shift, which God knows when it will take place. But it's something, again, that's been spoken about Ray Dalio in his book, The Changing World Order. And so as you can see up on this chart, which I've used in other videos as well, you know, you'll see the growth of the Chinese economy in red, and the gradual decline of the US economy in blue. Now, this has been taking place for over 20 years or so. And again, it's very important to look at kind of like some of the other colours on this graph as well, really to highlight that things happen in cycles. You know, no country has ever historically remained an economic superpower, and these things typically probably happen like once in a lifetime. And so one of the potential options you might want to be looking at is to invest in some capacity in gold or precious metals. You can do this in a number of ways. Like there are some ETCs, which are exchange traded commodities, that you can look at. I've put some links in the description below of some that I've been looking at. Now, you know, gold is at its highest price for some time now. And I'm always one to try and find opportunities that are on the cheap. So this is something that I'm looking at. I'm kind of just gauging the socio-economic climate at the moment. before I decide whether or not I go in with these. Another thing you might want to look at is like Bitcoin. Again, Bitcoin is at almost an all-time high at the moment. If I'm being totally honest, you know, if you're looking at Bitcoin now, you should have been looking at it probably 3 months ago or so, because it's expensive. It's going to probably go up a little bit more after April, after the halving. But I'm just going to be honest, is like I made my moves in crypto like 3 or 4 months ago, and I know other people who have done the same. So again, just being completely honest with that one. Now, another one which might be worth looking at is like ETFs, exchange traded funds. You could potentially look at an all world index fund. And I really like all world index funds. An example would be the Vanguard one, because what this is going to do, it's going to have a basket of stocks from everywhere in the world. It's going to have Apple, it's going to have Amazon, it's going to have Nvidia, but it's also going to have Tencent, Alibaba, and then it's going to factor in stocks or companies from across countries in the BRICS as well. So an all-world ETF index fund is a good opportunity, because in that way you're betting on the world, and you're going to have a basket of stocks of the biggest countries in the world as well. And certainly if you're looking in for like passive investing, or just having this as part of your portfolio whilst you pick individualized stocks, I think this is a really good strategy, and it's something that I'm certainly going to adopt. You can also look at like ETFs or index funds in BRICS nations, bearing in mind the information that I provided around Statista, or emerging markets as well. And certainly one of the like major opportunities right now, you know, I've mentioned that gold is a bit expensive, I've mentioned that Bitcoin is a bit expensive. What I'm looking at right now in China, Tencent, Alibaba and JD.com, you know, China's experiencing growing pains in its economy right now. Things happen in cycles, like I said before. All of these three stocks are really undervalued right now if you're going to buy and hold for the long term. I did a separate video on all three of these stocks. You'll see it like up here somewhere, and I'll put a link in the description to that below, and you can look at that in your own time. And then finally, another good thing to look at is like a conglomerate company, a bit like Berkshire Hathaway, but perhaps somewhere else abroad. Certainly one that's caught the eye for me is a company called First Pacific. Again, I'll put a link in the description below. Now, why I like these is that this company is that they have kind of quite a small portfolio. I think it's like off the top of my head like 5 to 7 companies, but what I really like is that they're in like kind of staple companies or industries, if you like. When I say staple industries, what I mean is like food. I think they have investments in like water and waste management. They have some investments in infrastructure, in building. And what with like certain economies certainly showing growth or opportunity to grow in the future, you know, this looks like a really interesting opportunity to me as well. And it's priced, it's not at its highest for sure. I think it's not at its complete lowest, but it presents an interesting opportunity for me at a relatively decent price as well. The main thing to note is that, you know, the US government and the UK government are basically insolvent. When you look at both of these governments, the US government, I think it's in $34 trillion of debt, and the UK government is in around £63 billion pounds of debt. But to me, the statistics, the information, all is kind of pointing towards one thing, and we're not there yet. And I think that's the key thing, is we're not there yet, and this is where the opportunity is. It's like positioning yourself now, putting yourself in a situation where you're being like proactive about the situation. You're looking at the data, you're looking at the information, rather than waiting until, let's just say, there is a problem and it becomes a whole lot more difficult because more and more countries have lost faith in the US dollar, in the power of the US dollar. More countries are shifting strategically towards the BRICS because they want to position themselves, their economies and their countries in better positions. This is what's happening. These companies are moving there because they feel that there is an opportunity for prosperity in aligning with the BRICS. And so whether it's the Chinese economy, whether it's the BRICS as a collective, or whether it's, you know, a global CBDC, let's just say, you know, there are a number of different things happening at the moment. No one can be completely certain about the future. What we can do is just look at the information that's presented and make the best informed decisions we have with the information we do have. So look, I hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching, and catch you in the next one. All the best.